A day after Russia vowed to draw down some of its troops around Kyiv, there's been no letup in the bombardment across Ukraine. New strikes have rocked civilian areas in the north and the southeast. The U.S. said that Russia started to reposition fewer than 20% of its forces arrayed around the capital. But officials caution that Moscow is expected to redeploy them elsewhere. Meantime, various reports say new U.S. intelligence suggests that Putin's military and intelligence aides have misinformed him on Ukraine, adding to tension inside the Kremlin. Ali Rogan begins our coverage.
Russia said it would scale back its offensive, but the destruction overnight tells a different story.
Yesterday, Russians have publicly stated that they are decreasing their offensive and activities towards Chernihiv and Kyiv directions. Do we believe this? Of course not.
Attacks against key infrastructure also continue. In the western city of Khmelnytsky, 3 strikes hit a fuel storage facility. Further south, heavy shelling continued in the southern, separatist-controlled city of Donetsk. The separatists blamed Ukraine.
I was just sitting on the couch and bang, the window glass popped. The frames came off. I didn't even understand what happened.
It all happened as Russia claimed it would refocus its campaign in the eastern Donbas region. But Russian losses continue to mount, and today Secretary of State Antony Blinken said President Putin was being misled about Moscow's military performance.
One of the Achilles heels of autocracies is that you don't have people in those systems who speak truth to power or who have the ability to speak truth to power. And I think that is something that we're seeing in Russia.
U.S. and British officials believe it is likely that Russia will divert more troops to the Donbass. But as troops move away from Kyiv, airstrikes will continue.
It's extremely sad. It's extremely unjust. And again, you're feeling it's not only the struggle for these pieces of land where you grew, it's the struggle for what will be the rules on which we are building our free world.
Natan Sharansky was an anti-Soviet human rights activist who was born in Donetsk. He was arrested in the 70s over charges of treason and espionage and sentenced to 13 years of forced labor. After his release in 1986, he was allowed to move to Israel in a prisoner swap, where he became a politician. Now he's an advocate, visiting Washington for meetings with Jewish leaders and lawmakers. He says the Ukrainians tell him they are skeptical of talks, but still want to sit down with Putin.
They're very suspicious that Russians are only trying to gain the time because they found that their military concept is not working. They want very much there will be direct conversation between Putin and Zelensky because they believe that all the real rational arguments are on their side. But do they really believe that what will solve the problem? No, they believe only that the Russian force has to be answered by the force. And that's why they are praying, begging, asking, appealing to the West, give us the weapons to fight.
Presidents Biden and Zelensky spoke today, including about the weapons the U.S. has already provided. The U.S. says those arms have had, quote, critical effects on the conflict. Mr. Biden also pledged to give an additional $500 million in aid. And diplomacy continued in Turkey, but with little progress towards peace. Ukraine submitted its requests, including a pledge to renounce its bid to join NATO if Russia withdraws its troops, in exchange for NATO-style security guarantees, and a 15-year negotiation period on the status of Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the list was a good start, but that the path to peace remained long.
This is a positive factor. As for the rest, so far, let's say, we cannot state anything very promising, any breakthroughs. There is still a lot of work to be done.
Meanwhile, Europe continues to reduce its dependence on Russian energy. Today, Poland announced new steps to cut off all Russian gas imports by the end of the year, which account for more than half of its supply. Poland also hosts half of the 4 million people now estimated to have fled Ukraine since the invasion began. The UN believes another 6.5 million people are displaced inside Ukraine. Evacuees from the besieged city of Mariupol have taken shelter in a supermarket more than 120 miles away in Zaporizhia. It's been temporarily transformed into a center for refugees.
There is no Mariupol anymore. They bombed it completely.
Zaporizhia is also now home to this young boy being treated for wounds sustained in the Mariupol bombardment. He's crying out for his father. The good news, his father survived and is just receiving treatment elsewhere in the hospital. But as negotiators talk and bombs fall, there will be many more families waking up to tragedy. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Allie Rogan.